Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Well, welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your guest host, Jeff Kritzberg with Innovative Financial Solutions and Insurance. Today, my guest speaker is Drew Sherman, award winner and peer recognized attorney with Mashian Law Group in Los Angeles. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Our podcast gives the opportunity not only to get to know different professionals in their fields and what they do, but get to know more about them and personally and find out why they do what they do. So let's get started.
Okay.
So we'll start with Drew. Why law? And is it something you always wanted to do? Like, how did you get into it?
Why law? That's a good question. Probably a bit of a story, but let's see. Went to law school probably because I didn't know what I wanted to do after graduated college and wasn't ready for the real world, and thought that law school might be a lot like college, which I had a ton of fun in. And so I was very mistaken about that. But once I committed to law school, I definitely persevered and made it through. If you ask my parents, they would probably tell you that I was always arguing with them, even as a child, and that they said, you should be a lawyer since you like to argue, which is weird and kind of contradictory to the way I operate in my personal life, because I'm kind of conflict adverse in my personal life, but I can do it well professionally. I have no problem arguing for other people. And then I might even say I saw A Few Good Men, and I was inspired by Tom Cruise, as it were, in that movie.
The best scene ever.
It's a great movie, top to bottom, and definitely saw that movie and definitely said, that looks pretty cool. I think maybe I should do that. So, but no, it was not a childhood dream of mine to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a baseball player, a football player. In fact, I believe my mother said when I was really young, even though I'm Jewish, I said I wanted to be a priest. So, go figure that. So no, not a childhood dream, just, made sense.
Oh, fantastic. On the part about the arguing and becoming a lawyer, I think a lot of parents always say that. Like I said that to my older daughter, because she loved to argue when she was growing up, and we always used to say, maybe I should turn out to be a lawyer. But no, that's not.
I think the thing was that even when I was younger, I used to win the arguments against my parents, against adults. So, that was the precursor and the foreshadowing of me going into this profession.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, was there a moment in your early career that really shaped the way you practice your law today? Anything that stands out that was that moment that kind of shaped how you do your things?
That's a really good question. I think it's been maybe multiple moments along the way. Given what I do as a civil litigator, I'm the guy that goes into court, i.e. that's why I brought up Tom Cruise and Few Good Men. I'm the one that does the trials and does the motions and goes before a jury and tries to persuade them to see our client's point. But there's I think we're always evolving. I always like to say that I never want to stop learning, that once you stop learning, you start dying. So, but to answer your question specifically, was there one specific instance that has shaped the way that I practice law or do what I do? No, but in a general sense, in personal life as well as actually in professional life, I liked what motivates me to do what I do is when I see people being taken advantage of by others who are in a position of power over them, or think that they're the smartest person in the room and think they can get away with things, that think that they can just take advantage of other people. I don't like seeing that in real life. I don't like seeing that in what I do as a lawyer. And so, it's definitely motivated me and helps me stay focused when, I'm helping clients. And I think that's what I like, is helping clients who need the help and are being taken advantage of in some way. And that's not to say that I haven't represented people who maybe were not necessarily being taken advantage of, but maybe were doing some things that that they were trying to take advantage of. I'm not going to try to be a saint, because we all need to do what we need to do. And I've been an employee at firms where I was assigned cases and told, here, you got to represent them and you got to do what you got to do sometimes. But it's definitely motivating, like I said, and inspiring. And it makes me feel good about what I do as a professional when I can help people who really do need the help. And there's been many instances in my career where I've had the fortunate ability to help people that really were being taken advantage of and really did need help. And not to be boastful, but I'm good at what I do. And I was able to help them and they appreciated it. Along those same lines, I would also say, I learned on the flip side of things, never get too emotionally invested in your clients and in your case. Is one thing that maybe I had not practiced early on in my career. And when you get too close, though I think it helps me be a better lawyer, but it can also create friction between you and that person. I try not to become friends with my clients for those reasons, but so I can stay objective and so they can stay objective as well. But some instances it's been inevitable because there are certain people that I like personally, and so when I represent them, I want to make sure that I do a good job and I continue to work with them and have a social life with them. But what's that?
I said it makes sense.
Yeah, but there's been instances where those relationships have been turned on their heads and I didn't appreciate it. And so you got to be a little bit guarded about who you let into your personal life as a professional.
Yeah, on my side, not so much in the financial service, but on the life insurance side and those types of products, I get really involved, obviously, in my client's life because we're trying to protect their life and they're talking about their kids and their family. So you get really intertwined into the goings on and their daily information. So it's tough to separate yourself sometimes, and because you're so involved in what they're doing.
Well,
so I get it.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure as a financial professional, yeah, you're definitely diving into their personal lives and along the same lines probably that I have. I mean, the way that I look at what I do is it's kind of my job in a certain sense to step into their shoes and take on their worry for the client. I don't do criminal law, I don't do family law on purpose because I've delved into those areas a tiny bit and it was just nothing that I want to touch with a 10-foot pole ever again. But on a business sense, and in the society we live in, money is important for families, for people, for businesses. And so my job is to step in a client's shoes and take on their worry. And so I wind up being sometimes a therapist for the client, manager of sorts, a counselor. So I can wind up wearing a number of hats.
Absolutely. Well, for people who are not familiar with civil litigation or what that includes, what kind of disputes are typically end up in civil court or the stuff that you kind of handle?
So, I mean, civil litigation, I've been practicing over 21 plus years, I think it is at this point, if my math is correct. And in being a civil litigator, you kind of have to become an expert in all various types of industries. For the most part, it's going to be business disputes, dealing with contracts, people not paying or doing something that another party thinks transgresses a contract, if you were. It could be neighbors having a dispute over a property line issue. It could be I've done a client who was a restaurateur who sold their chain of restaurants, and then there was a breach of the contract and they were using her name and likeness without authorization in the restaurants, and they weren't supposed to do that anymore. I've dealt with authors of a book that were being sued by somebody claiming to be Marilyn Monroe's on-set photographer, and there was a copyright dispute. I've dealt with rock and roll bands in fighting between members of a rock band that is pretty famous, trying to get contracts and copyrights and trademarks from one another so that they could go out on tour, because one band member wanted a tour, one band member didn't want a tour. I've had to deal with any number of things. It's going to be, it's going to be really, what I do is going to be mostly about money.
Sure.
To sum it down into one really overarching theme, it would be about money. It's not going to be about, as I said, family law is about, getting assets or time with kids, and criminal law is about keeping, somebody out of prison. Whereas what I do is about disputes among people that say, you owe me money, I owe you money, or something of that nature, well, for the most part.
Is there, without going into breaking confidential details, but is there like one specific case that stands out as like, that was the case that stands out in the career, like, oh my God, I can't believe we did this, or it was, the pinnacle, or like just that's the case that you talk about it with your friends all the time. Like, remember when I had this, or,
There are a few cases like that. The Marilyn Monroe case was definitely one, and I don't look back on those cases necessarily with fondness, because a variety of things can happen and not everything plays out as you think it's going to play out. But the Marilyn Monroe case is definitely one. The rock band case is definitely one. Each case presents its own unique set of circumstances, and I try to find the humor or the interest in those things. And there's definitely been cases where I can recall certain funny things that happened. A lot of the cases are public record, so wouldn't be talking out of turn essentially for most of it. Marilyn Monroe case was litigated. There is a public record of that can be found. Same thing with the rock band case. But for example, I was doing a deposition where our client was being deposed, and this is just a funny anecdote about things that can happen during the litigation. But our client was being deposed, and he was asked at the very beginning of the case, you're sworn in like you are in court, and all lawyers will ask, as soon as the witness is sworn in, all lawyers will ask the same question. And I've done thousands of these, and I've sit thousands of these. They will ask, okay, now that you've been sworn in, do you understand that you are obligated to tell the truth, like you're sitting in a court of law in front of a judge and a jury? And I had one guy who is a great guy, but he made me laugh because his response to the lawyer on the other side asking that question was, only God may judge me. And he went through a 5-minute diatribe about, I don't know what, but it was 5 minutes long. And at the end of his diatribe, the lawyer on the other side asked the same question I would have asked. He goes, is that a yes or a no? So it's just funny anecdotes that pop up that I appreciate about what I do. But it can also be quite gut-wrenching. Like I said, I take on the worry of my clients, and if things go awry, and they always do, and I've said this to clients, even like I said, not to be boastful, but I'm good at what I do, and I've had a lot of success. But I've told clients this multiple times, even when things are always going right for us, that I've never seen a shutout pitch in law. There's always going to be something that's going to go against you. The judge will make a bad ruling. The juries are unpredictable. Some evidence will pop up. I mean, the next client that tells me 100% of everything that I need to know right off the bat will be the first. So, there's always something unpredictable about law and something that might not go your way. And you just got to be prepared for those types of things and those kinds of things to arise. But it can be heart-wrenching in that sense because you are invested in the client, you are invested in the case. Litigations take a long time, years. You put a lot of work, a lot of effort, and sometimes with judges, it can be really hard. It can be really disheartening about my career in the profession because, believe it or not, judges don't always follow the law. They don't. And what's the remedy to make them follow the law is to appeal them. Except appeals, believe it or not, have a success rate of less than 50%. I believe the latest statistics are like 27% success rate on appeals. So if a judge rules that the sky is purple and everybody else knows that it's blue, the sky is going to be purple for that case, and the judge goes, well, you don't like it, appeal me. And I have a 1 in 3 chance of the Court of Appeal saying, nope, the sky is blue, not purple. So those are not great odds, and that's hard because, what am I going to do with the client? I know what the law is. I know what the law should be. I can counsel a client and say, this is what the law says. I know the law very well. This is how it should play out. But sometimes when judges don't follow the law, and I have to say, well, what do I tell the client? The judge didn't follow the law. It doesn't really sit well with the client who's paying a lot of money for legal services. So
right. That's their interpretation. The judge's interpretation of the law is another conversation, right?
You're being very generous when you say interpretation of the law in the examples that I'm talking about. But
right.
And there are good judges and bad judges. So some days, to answer your question, Jeff, some days I love what I do. I love that I help people. It's like I said, I'm good at what I do, and I like winning. I'm a competitive person. I played sports all throughout my life. And on some days, I want to go back to being a server at a restaurant.
I understand that. Well, what advice would you give? At what point should someone consult a civil litigation attorney when they're having a dispute? Like at which point where they should think it's time?
It's a good question. First of all, most lawyers, regardless of the type of practice, are always going to give you anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes free consultation. So if you have a question about something going on in your life that you think involves the law, dispute with a neighbor over a tree hanging over into your yard, you're doing a business transaction and you think that the contract was breached or anything like that, it's always a good idea to go consult an attorney. The attorneys will give you 20, 30 minutes, sometimes even longer of their time. Sometimes they'll do, if it's very minimal, sometimes they'll do it for free. So you really should, at any point in time, before you commit to anything, definitely. And to answer your question, I'd even say it's more further back than that, in that a lot of people, especially when it comes to business disputes and running a business and things that I deal with, is that they are penny wise and pound foolish a lot, because and I can understand it, when they're starting a business or they're new in business, it's hard to rationalize paying a lawyer to foresee and to provide counsel on something or on a problem that maybe hasn't happened yet. People, when they start businesses or when they're dealing with things such as estate planning, they don't consult a lawyer at the beginning. And that could be very foolish and unwise, because they think that they're saving a few $1,000s up front. But what that's going to wind up doing, because there's a reason why we go to law school, there's a reason why you are a professional, there's a reason why I'm a professional, there's a reason why we charge money for our services, is because we know things and we can do things that the lay person can't. And as it should be. Not everybody can be an expert in every aspect of life, especially when it comes to finances, especially when it comes to law. And so what they do is they don't consult an attorney to review a contract, to draft a contract, to draft an estate plan, to do whatever initially, and they think they're saving $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is. But in the long run, because it'll wind up costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run. And that's the foolish thing. So to answer your question in a kind of roundabout way, what I would say to people is spend the money up front on a lawyer. Contracts, and even just getting an advice, spending a couple hours with the lawyer to get counsel and advice, because I do that all the time, where I don't draft anything. I'll just sit and talk with them, and I'll explain the law, explain the different avenues that they can go, and it's their decision to make. But at least they have the information to make that informed decision. But spend the money up front, because it will save you much more money in the long run. And other than that, like I said, lawyers are, despite the conventional stereotype, we are not all a-holes. We won't start charging you the minute that you sit down with us. We will give most people, I'll speak for myself at least, I don't charge somebody when they just want to consult and we're going to sit down. And like I said, if it's very simple, basic stuff, I'll tell them where to go, what to do. I might even do a little bit of work for them and not charge them if it's really minimal. Because lawyers, believe it or not, and contradictory maybe to the traditional stereotype, our job is to help people. Our job is to help people navigate and make informed decisions. We work for our clients. The clients don't work for us. I'm there to give advice and counsel to people, but it's your life. If you don't want to take my advice, if you want, I will tell you what I think you should do. but ultimately it's your decision to make. And if you don't want to do it, and I've had clients do this all the time, they appreciate, they say, okay, Drew, I understand, but I'm going to go a different direction. That's their call. It's their life. I don't know. Did I answer your question? I kind of went around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same on my end. We give advice and hopefully they take it. And, we're talking long-term plans, but similar to what you were saying about getting advice up in the front end, I deal with that with businesses as well, especially with partners. And we're talking about partnership agreements and what if one partner dies, how does the spouse take over? And so many times that I've talked to clients who have not put this in writing and thought about
buy-sell agreements, right?
Buy-sell agreements, and that just gets, if that happens later, it just becomes a situation, and then they have to come to you to take care of how they're going to deal with their surviving family, the assets, the valuation, and what's an equitable buyout number. It's much easier to deal with that up on the front end, like you said, and saves a lot of hassle on the back end. So I totally agree with you on that. So for you, what would you consider your ideal client?
Oh, my ideal client is a client that, it depends. I mean, if we're talking about if a client is in the midst of a litigation, like the lawsuit's already been filed and they're, kneeling to deal with it, or if they're pre-litigation before filing and we're dealing with transactional stuff like contracts and making sure that everything is where it should be. Because remember, contracts are not there when everything is going perfect. At the beginning of an agreement, everybody has the best intentions and everybody's ready to go and amped up and ready to do what they're supposed to do. Contracts are there for when the shit hits the fan, excuse my expression. But right. That's what contracts are for, not when everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. So, but to answer your question about what is my ideal client, it's not necessarily about who or what resources they have, though that is important because litigation is not cheap. It is time consuming. It's for people with resources, though that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have proper legal counsel, and there are ways to deal with that, and I do pro bono work, etc. But the one thing I will say, regardless of the type of matter that we're talking about, whether it's contracts, counseling, or involved in litigation, the one quality that I think benefits the client and benefits what I do more than anything else is a client that has objectivity to the matter that they're involved in, which is difficult because it is personal to them and they're talking about usually their money and money being taken away, which is very emotional for people. But also clients that can make, and because of what I do as a litigator and I'm dealing in the legal aspect of usually business and commercial disputes, like I said, not family law, not criminal law, is to be able to make business decisions. I think that's the one key thing. And that goes along the lines of the objectivity of the client, because with what I do, it really is about business and business decisions. And even if we're talking about a dispute amongst neighbors where it's your own personal piece of real estate, or even things that are definitely involving your personal assets, your personal finances, and not necessarily a business, when it comes to litigation, when it comes to law, at least the law that I do, you definitely want to make an objective business decision. And I have a saying that I give to all clients that I've been saying for years, that, ego, revenge, respect, and principle are very expensive in the law. Do it. I have no problem. You want your ego, your revenge, your principle, your sense of justice, your respect, I will do it. But you're going to pay me a lot of money to do it. And at the end of the day, all you're going to have is your principle, your ego, your sense of revenge, respect, or justice. Okay, and nothing else to show for it. So if that's worth it to you, that's fine, but you're going to pay me a lot of money to do it. And that's not a business decision. And it's hard for people to understand that until the time consumption factor, till the legal bills start piling up, till the realities of the situation start happening. And now there's only one exception to that rule, though, is that if it's my principle, ego, revenge, sense of justice, because I'll make your life a living hell just because it's Tuesday. So, that's the only exception to that rule. But for other people, you want to make business decisions and be smart about it.
So what brought you to the Mashian Law Group?
I was looking for an office. I don't, I've kind of been on my own for a little bit at certain points in my career. I don't like it. I like having, Brian Mashian, the principal of our firm. He is a very well seasoned attorney, he's known as the guy in certain areas of law that is essentially the expert. So I appreciated that. And the other attorneys here are really good at what they do. And I like being able to walk down the hall and bounce ideas off people. I'm a collaborative team player. Like I said, I played sports my entire life. So and they were always, team sports, not tennis or golf. Though I do play pickleball and I have played golf, but I usually like being with other people. So, but I played baseball, played football, played hockey, and I like that team collaborative effort. And I'm just also a kind of just social people person. So I like to, be in the mix with other people. And I liked kind of his the way that he was approaching his practice. I liked the people that I met when I was talking to them about possibly joining. I liked the area that the office was located in. The compensation always helps. To be,
Sure.
I don't work for free, so those are some of the aspects of what brought me to Mashian Law.
Oh, fantastic. So on a personal note, what would you like people to know about you personally, maybe that separates you from, we're in the land of lawyers, obviously, right? So, what separates you, or some things you could tell us?
One, this is what I would say, and has served me not only with clients really, but also with juries as well, which is an important aspect of what I do. I have a way of explaining complex concepts that can be understandable to lay persons. If you talk to me on a regular basis, unlike some attorneys who I can infer act like this, I don't talk down to my clients. Like I said, lawyers, whether they admit it or not, we work for our clients. Clients don't work for us. Right. So our job is to present the various aspects of the law, the different avenues they can take, the different information, and it's up to the client. And we are their mouthpiece. We work for them. You want me to do this, even though I might not agree with it, that's your call. And as long as I've made that clear, and to be, that's your call. So I think clients appreciate that. I keep it very real with the clients. I tell them, like I said, I'll tell them when they're doing stupid stuff or they're not doing what they should be doing. Again, that's their choice. I can't make them do things. I can tell them it's not going to be good for your case. This is going to be bad, and you're going down a path where we can lose some things. But that's their call. That's their life, their business. So I keep it real, which I think clients and juries appreciate. English was my worst subject, so my vocabulary is very third grade, maybe better than that. But so I don't talk with highfalutin words. And like I said, it all goes to, and especially when it comes to juries, juries are regular people, and especially in the kind of litigations that I do, civil litigations, which we're dealing with contracts and business disputes, they're bored. They're looking for law and order when they get put on a jury, and they're not going to get it with me. They're getting, boring stuff. So I also keep things entertaining. I have been known regularly to quote movies that people know in court and to juries. I'm known to keep things light and funny, make the juries laugh, which they appreciate, and to just be very straightforward, real, make complex concepts simple, understandable, but also in what I do, and the juries can see this and the clients can see this when we're in court, is that I really do know my stuff very well. I know the law, I know civil procedure, which is very important in litigation, which means like the rules of court, and judges respect that, even the ones that don't necessarily like me. They at least respect me because I know what I'm doing, and that can be beneficial to the client when they're in court. The juries see that as compared to lawyers who are a-holes or don't know what they're doing or not good at what they're doing. It's very evident when you get that far down the line into trial that it becomes very clear what lawyers know their stuff and what lawyers don't, and what kind of people they are. I mean, it's pretty clear. So I think those are the qualities that I bring to my practice that make me successful and what clients appreciate. And I'm just a regular dude. I got kids. I've had hardships. I've had, my kids talk back to me. I'm just like a regular, I have just a regular guy going to parent teacher conferences and having to coach on the sideline and stuff like that. So I understand regular life and what happens in real life as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, in my world, it's the same. You got to be able to explain it plainly so that because they're not our clients are not the experts in the field, and they need to be told it would make sense in their environment. But you obviously getting them all the details that's necessary, but you got to make it understandable to their level and not be an encyclopedia, obviously.
Correct. I think you probably have a tougher job of doing that than I do, though, because financial, macro and microeconomics is much more complicated than I think explaining the law a little bit in certain aspects.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely get a mixture of people. You have the people that want, for you to back up your recommendations based on statistics and numbers and historical data. Those are the trickier ones because you got to be very detail and data oriented. But a lot of people just like any profession, there's a level of trust that they got to build in you that you're going to be able to take care of them. And just like you said, we work for them. You have to come across as someone who's going to take care of them, and your interest is in them and not in yourself, right? And if you come across that way and what you provide makes sense, it gets easier at that point, right? You do have the whole gamut of people. And same thing, I'm sure you deal with different levels of clients and how much they need to know versus how much trust they put into you and go along with the game plan.
Of course. The trust factor is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
Two.
Two.
Boy and a girl. Yep.
How old?
Boy is going to be 14 in 6 days, and the girl just turned 11 a few months ago.
Wow. Good times. Yeah. And you
I don't know if I characterize it as that good times, but
in between other times, there's good times.
Yeah.
In between life. And you coach some of their teams?
Yeah, it's my son's flag football team and a little bit of my daughter's soccer. So yeah, but now they're getting up into higher levels, and I don't have the time to commit to really being the coach of the teams that is required. So I'll let somebody deal with that headache because as I said, I'm competitive. So I was coaching flag football, and I felt like I was getting a heart attack every Sunday. And I don't know how these professional guys do it when it's really on the line. I mean, I'm coaching 11 and 12-year-old flag football team, and nothing, and I'm making it like it's Super Bowl Sunday. So that's probably
I coached I have two girls, 21 and 24 right now. But basketball was my favorite sport. So I coached a lot of their basketball, and I'm very competitive and, want them to do what they're supposed to do. The funniest thing I could say about that, and they don't consider it as funny, is when I go back, because I recorded everything, so much on video. And when I go back and watch them and hear myself barking or giving instructions, or even when I was in the stands and I was recording a game, watching them, and just the amount of, I wouldn't call it yelling, just loud encouragement or direction, right?
I like that, loud encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah.
My kids can say that they can hear my voice from like a mile away. So
yeah, I asked them, did you hear me when I was in there? Like, oh yeah, we just ignored you.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like an eye-opening because I never thought of myself as that loud or that much. But when I go back and hear the recordings, it's like, I guess I was.
Well, my father was worse than me. So as long as I am not as bad as him, I feel like I'm doing good. So
there you go. You're breaking the chain just a little bit less.
Well, he was formally excluded from my Little League baseball games. So that gives you an idea.
I get it. So coming near the end, a couple more things. If someone was listening today and facing a potential legal dispute, what's one piece of advice you'd want them to remember if they're getting close to, obviously talk to a professional, but what's kind of one tidbit as we're getting close to that?
I mean, again, for what I do, I'm going to go back to this, is that you got to make business decisions. Take your subjectivity out of it, take your emotion out of it, at least for what I do. Again, litigation or the type of law that I practice, like I said, it's really about money. So be able to make that business decision. What's the cost benefit analysis? Don't let the cost get more than the benefit, then it's time to get out. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely an important aspect of things. Make sure that you are listening to your attorneys, because we have the information, and we know really, if you don't know what they're saying, ask them to explain it again. Those are some of the things that I would say in terms of if you're facing a legal dispute. And specifically for what I do, I'm talking about when you're in the midst of a litigation.
Sure.
But, and as well as I'm going to reiterate from what I said earlier, for a business owner, spend the little bit of money up front on a lawyer, on the contracts, to get everything set at the beginning, because it will save you money in the long run. A contract will outline exactly what the obligation to, for the most part. Obviously, there's always disputes because you can't predict every little scenario that's going to arise in a business or in life, that you can't write everything into a contract. That's why there's interpretation. But having that contract at the beginning, even if it costs you a little bit of money, will save you a headache, will save you heartache, will save you a lot of money in the long run. Do that up front, because that will really take care of things. And once you have that contract and everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, what their rights are, what their obligations are, then there's no need to necessarily argue about it or leave it up to interpretation. But obviously, like I said, can't predict everything, and there's going to be situations that arise that are not going to be written into the contract. And hopefully you can be objective and not let your emotions get the better of you when you're having that dispute. Even if somebody wrongs you and you think that they are the biggest a-hole and justice needs to be had, and I'm right, and it's principle, like I said before, I will do it. It's going to cost you a lot of money. And at the end of the day, all you're going to have is your principle and your right and your justice. And if you're okay with that, I'm more than happy to do it. We are more than happy to do it for you. But at the end of the day, that might be the only thing that you have.
So how do you acquire new clients? How do clients find you, or where do clients normally come to you from?
I mean, we're pretty well known, and so we have a big referral system. I think we have a website. I'm sure we do. I couldn't even tell you, because that's how much we get in referrals. I sometimes will do speaking engagements. I know Brian Mashian, the principal of our firm, he definitely does a lot of speaking engagements. He's like the guru of commercial real estate and commercial real estate transactions. In California, he's the guy that wrote all the forms for one of the groups. What is it, AIR or CAR, California Association of Realtors or something like that. So he does a lot of speaking engagements, gets a lot of referrals that way. Get a lot of referrals through various organizations. And, here in LA, I believe you're in LA, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah. In Los Angeles, we are the busiest state and federal courts in the entire country, is Los Angeles County. We have the busiest state court, the busiest federal court. So there's no shortage of litigations going on of people that need help. So, and sometimes we're referred by other lawyers. I refer stuff out to people, the stuff that I just don't do, personal injury, stuff like that. I have lawyers I refer to, and they refer back to us. So, there's that referral process, but it's mostly word of mouth, and we just get people coming in.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, referrals is the best way, when someone has a good experience and then they tell someone they know about it, and then they come to you. It's definitely a better conversation than, someone finding your website and giving you a call.
I once heard somebody say that a referral is the best thank you that they ever got.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Other than the website, you're on LinkedIn? Any other ways that people contact you?
I'm not going to give out my cell phone on here, but
that's okay.
No, I mean, MashianLaw.com. You can always obviously go to I've never Googled myself, but I'm sure you could, and I'm sure I pop up. Although I do believe there is another Drew Sherman, who is a lawyer here in Los Angeles. Funny enough, I think I went to Hebrew school with him, when I was a kid. And I've been contacted for articles because he worked for a director as an assistant that was accused of Me Too stuff. So I remember a few years ago, I did get a call wanting me to be interviewed about the Me Too movement and my association with this director. And I said, I think you have the wrong Drew Sherman. And the person was like, well, aren't you Drew Sherman, the lawyer? I'm like, yep, but I don't think I'm that lawyer. So
I think when I was doing a little bit of research, I think there was also another Drew Sherman lawyer in Florida, just so that you know.
I think there's also a priest or a pastor in Texas, because I used to get phone calls randomly from Texas asking about the Sunday barbecue and stuff like that. So I also think there's Drew Sherman, it's become a common name, I think, maybe.
All right, well, fantastic. Before we wrap up, any other final thoughts that you can give our listeners?
As my LinkedIn profile says, be nice until it's time to not be nice.
Good words to live by.
And I stole that from Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. So just to be very transparent about that.
I remember that. It's a good movie. I like it.
Yeah, it's a good line. It's true for what I do.
It does make sense. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up. I want to say thanks for listening. This has been the Legacy Leader podcast with your guest host, me, Jeff Kritzberg. From Innovative Financial Solutions and Insurance, my guest was Drew Sherman from Mashian Law, award-winning and peer-recognized attorney. For more information about Drew Sherman and the work he does, visit their website at www.mashianlaw.com. And we'll also link his information in the show notes. Drew, thank you for joining today. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the information and talking to you. It was a pleasure.
Jeff, the pleasure is all mine. I really appreciate the conversation and what you do.
I appreciate it. You take care.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.